Lucas, a shy 8-year-old boy, sat at his school desk and looked anxiously out the classroom window. The teacher, Mrs. Garcia, a kind and attentive woman, observed her students while explaining the material. Lucas was restless. His heart was beating fast and he nervously played with the pencil in his hands. His uncle, Miguel, had promised to pick him up after class for a special surprise. However, Lucas felt a knot forming in his stomach whenever he thought about it. He didn't want to go home with his uncle, but he didn't know how to tell the teacher. As the class continued, Mrs. Garcia noticed Lucas's agitation. She gently approached him and asked with concern, "Lucas, is everything okay, honey? You seem a little worried today." Lucas looked up with his brown eyes full of anxiety. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words seemed to get stuck in his throat. Finally, he muttered, I don't want to go home with my uncle today." Mrs. Garcia's expression changed to a mixture of surprise and concern. She bent down to be at Lucas's eye level and asked gently, "Why not, Lucas? If something happened, you can tell me. I need you to tell me more about what's going on with you and your uncle," she said, her expression serious. "The more I know, the better I can help you." Lucas hesitated for a moment, but the compassion in the teacher's eyes encouraged him to speak. He lowered his voice as if afraid someone might hear. Lucas seems a little nervous but determined to share his story. "My uncle, he's been strange lately. He takes me to strange places and makes me do things I don't understand," Lucas began, his voice wavering. "He says it's to help me develop a special gift, but I don't know what that means. And he won't let me talk about it." Mrs. Garcia felt a chill run down her spine. She never suspected anything like this about Miguel, who always seemed like a kind man at parent-teacher meetings. "Where does he usually take you, Lucas?" she asked, keeping her voice calm. Lucas looked at the floor, reluctant to respond. Finally, he muttered, "To an abandoned building near the park." Lucas's revelation left Teacher Garcia perplexed. An abandoned building? What kind of place was this? Her mind started racing, considering all the terrible possibilities that could be happening. She needed to act quickly to ensure Lucas' safety. With a serious expression, the teacher placed her hand on Lucas's shoulder and said, "Lucas, I need you to promise me that you will never go to that abandoned building with your uncle again. Do you understand?" Lucas nodded, his eyes still full of fear. He trusted Teacher Garcia, and her words brought him some comfort. "I'm going to talk to someone who can help," she said, remaining calm so as not to scare the boy even more. The teacher pursed her lips, trying to process Lucas's revelation. She knew she needed to act cautiously. She got up and returned to the front of the classroom, where she continued the lesson, but her mind was restless, thinking about what to do next. As the class continued, Teacher Garcia's mind worked incessantly. She decided that as soon as class ended, she would go straight to the school administration and report what Lucas had revealed. She began to devise a plan to help Lucas. She knew she needed to involve the other adults in his life, including his parents and school authorities, to ensure he was safe from any harm. Meanwhile, Lucas struggled with his own worries. He wondered if he did the right thing by telling the teacher. Would she judge him? Would his uncle find out and be angry with him? 1,000 questions swirled in his mind as time slowly dragged on until the end of the class. When the bell finally rang, signaling the end of classes for the day, Lucas felt a lump form in his throat. He stood up slowly, gathering his belongings as he nervously watched the classroom door. His heart was beating hard as he waited for Miguel. Meanwhile, Mrs. Garcia discreetly observed Lucas, worried about his well-being. She decided she needed to intervene, but carefully. She called Lucas to her desk before he could leave the room. After discussing her options with Lucas, Mrs. Garcia decided it was time to inform his parents about what was happening. She knew it would be a difficult conversation, but it was essential to ensure her students' safety. "Lucas, I thought a little about what you told me. Would you mind waiting a few minutes after class? I'd like to talk to you and your uncle before you guys go home." Lucas nodded shyly, not knowing what to expect. He wondered what the teacher had in mind and somewhat regretted telling her about his discomfort with his uncle. Meanwhile, outside the school, Miguel waited impatiently. He looked at the clock with a frown, irritated by Lucas's tardiness. He rubbed his hands nervously, wondering what could be happening. When the classroom door finally opened and Lucas came out, accompanied by Mrs. Garcia, Miguel frowned in confusion. He approached them with a tense expression. "Did something happen, Mrs. Garcia?" he asked, trying to maintain his composure. The teacher looked directly into Miguel's eyes with a firm and determined look. She was not willing to let this matter go. "Lucas told me that he has been feeling uncomfortable with some of the activities you have been doing together lately, Miguel. I would like to discuss this with you in private, if you don't mind." Miguel felt a chill down his spine when he heard the teacher's words. He tried to remain calm, but his heart was racing. What could Lucas have said? He was afraid that his secret would be revealed. "Of course, Mrs. Garcia," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Let's talk." The three headed to the director's office, where they could have a more private conversation. Ms. Garcia delicately explained her concerns, while Miguel tried to explain her actions in a way that would not arouse suspicion. Professor Garcia quickly explained what Lucas had shared with her about his uncle's suspicious activities. The director looked at Miguel with a hard expression. "Miguel, may I ask you to explain yourself?" she said, her voice icy. Miguel seemed surprised by Lucas's revelation. He looked at the boy with a mixture of anger and confusion. "Lucas, why are you saying these things?" he asked, his voice shaking slightly. Lucas swallowed, nervous about his uncle's reaction. However, he remained firm in his decision to tell the truth. I don't want to go to that abandoned building with you anymore, Uncle. It's scary and I don't like the things we do there," he said, his voice sounding stronger than before. Miguel seemed stunned by Lucas' words. He looked at Teacher Garcia and the principal, looking even more disconcerted. "That's a misunderstanding. I would never do anything to hurt Lucas," he said, his voice sounding sincere. The director looked at Lucas with a thoughtful expression. She knew that she needed to investigate further before making any decisions. She ordered Miguel to leave the room and asked to speak alone with Lucas and Professor Garcia. "Lucas, I need you to tell me everything that happens in this abandoned building. We can trust Mrs. Garcia to help you, but we need to fully understand what is happening," she said, her voice soft. Lucas took a deep breath and began to recount everything that had happened during his visits to the abandoned building. He talked about the strange rituals his uncle made him perform and how he always felt uncomfortable there. Teacher Garcia listened intently, her heart broken by Lucas' distress. She promised herself that she would do everything in her power to help the boy. Lucas felt guilty for causing all this confusion, but also relieved to finally share his fears with someone. The director listened attentively to the conversation, with a serious face as she assessed the situation. She took some notes and asked a few questions, ensuring that she fully understood Ms. Garcia's concerns. After a long discussion, the director decided that it would be best to involve Lucas' parents in the conversation. She called Lucas' mother and explained the situation, asking him to come to school as soon as possible. While they waited for Lucas' mother, the atmosphere in the director's office was tense. Miguel seemed increasingly nervous, while Mrs. Garcia kept her gaze firm and determined. Lucas felt like he was trapped in the middle of a storm, unable to do anything to calm the situation. When Lucas' mother Anna finally arrived at the school, she was taken to the principal's office where the situation was explained in detail. She listened intently, her face going through a variety of expressions as she processed the information. She saw the concern grow on their faces as they listened to her words, but she also saw a determination similar to her own to ensure her son's well-being. After a long conversation, it was decided that it would be best for Lucas not to go home with his uncle that day. Instead, he would be taken home by his mother, while Miguel would be invited to attend a meeting with the principal, Mrs. Garcia and Lucas' parents to discuss the situation in more detail. Together, they agreed to take immediate action to ensure Lucas was safe. They contacted school authorities and the police to report Miguel's suspicious activities and would also make arrangements for Lucas to stay with a family member until the situation was resolved. "Anna, thank you for coming so quickly. Please sit down. We are facing a delicate situation with Lucas and his uncle, Miguel," said the director. "Of course, I'm here to understand what's going on. What's happened to my son?" It appears there were some concerns raised about Miguel's behavior at school. He seemed quite nervous and agitated, and this raised some red flags for us. Oh, I see. And what exactly happened? Mrs. Garcia began to explain. Well, Lucas was waiting for his mother when we noticed that Miguel was quite tense. It didn't seem like a normal situation. And Lucas, how is he feeling about this? Anna asked. He seemed quite uncomfortable, like he was stuck in the middle of something he didn't fully understand. I understand. Now, what's the next step? Asked the mother. I'm sorry, Anna, for any concern this may have caused. I just wanted to take Lucas home as agreed, said Uncle Miguel. I understand, Miguel. But Lucas's safety is our priority. Maybe it would be better for him to go home with me today, said the mother. I agree. And perhaps we can set up a meeting to discuss this in more detail. Mr. Miguel, would you like to participate? Yes, of course. I want to resolve this in the best way possible. Lucas and his mother Anna talk on the way home. Lucas, how are you feeling? A little scared, Mom. What's going on? We're just taking some precautions to ensure your safety, darling. If something's bothering you, you can tell me. Lucas starts to vent to his mother. Uncle Miguel seems strange today. He always seems nervous lately. Thanks for picking me up today, Mom. We're in this together, baby. Never forget that. Lucas felt relieved that he wouldn't have to spend more time with his uncle that day, but he also worried about what it would mean for the future. He wondered if his uncle would be angry with him or if this would change their relationship forever. Meanwhile, Miguel left the school with a feeling of defeat. He wondered how everything had gone wrong so quickly. He knew he needed to be more careful in the future if he wanted to keep his secret safe. Anna lay beside Lucas as he slept, her angelic face serene in contrast to the turmoil that had plagued their lives. But Anna couldn't afford to rest. There was more work to be done, more battles to be won. The days that followed were a roller coaster of emotions. The confrontation with Lucas's uncle revealed shocking truths, secrets that had been kept in the shadows for too long. But Anna didn't back down. Every twist, every challenge, she faced bravely. And then, finally, the truth prevailed. With the help of authorities, Lucas' uncle was taken into custody. The light of safety shone once again on Anna's family. But Anna's journey didn't end there. In the heat of battle, she discovered a strength within herself that she never knew existed. She became not only her son's protector, but a tireless warrior for justice. Her journey for Lucas's sake had been arduous, but she emerged stronger than ever. And in her heart, she knew there was nothing she wouldn't do to keep her son safe, no matter what fate had in store. In the days that followed, the situation at Lucas' school continued to be the subject of much speculation. Some students wondered what had happened, while others worried about Lucas' safety. Mrs. Garcia tried to keep things as normal as possible in the classroom, but she could feel the tension in the air. Meanwhile, Lucas and his mother had several conversations about what happened at school. She tried to reassure him, saying that he did the right thing by talking about her fears, but Lucas still felt guilty for causing all this confusion. Finally, the day arrived for the meeting with the director, Mrs. Garcia, Lucas' parents, and Miguel. The conference room was tense as everyone sat around the table, each with their own concerns and expectations. The director began the meeting by explaining the situation in detail and then gave the floor to Mrs. Garcia, who shared her concerns about Miguel's behavior and its impact on Lucas. Lucas' parents then gave their opinion on the matter, expressing their gratitude to the school for handling the situation so effectively. They also shared their concerns about Lucas' well-being and agreed to take additional steps to ensure his safety. When it was Miguel's turn to speak, he seemed tense and uncomfortable. He tried to explain his actions as best he could, but it was clear that his version of events did not match those of Lucas and Mrs. Garcia. After a long discussion, the principal announced that Miguel would no longer be allowed to pick up Lucas from school and that additional measures would be taken to ensure Lucas' safety in the future. As the meeting came to an end and everyone got up to leave, Lucas felt relieved to finally put this difficult chapter behind him. He knew things would never be the same again, but he hoped it meant a safer and happier future for him. Lucas learned a valuable lesson about confidence, courage, and the importance of speaking up when something is wrong. He also learned that even when things seem bleak, there are always people willing to help and support him. As the days passed, life at Lucas's school returned to normal. He was still the same shy, gentle boy he always was, but now he knew he could trust his teacher and parents to keep him safe. But with the end of the school day approaching, Mrs. Garcia knew there was still a lot to be done. She needed to report her concerns to school authorities and collaborate with the police to ensure that Miguel was properly investigated. As she left school and headed home, her thoughts were filled with worries about Lucas and determination to ensure his safety. At the same time, she also wondered how her personal life would be affected by all of this, and how she could find a balance between her professional and personal responsibilities. As the sun set over the city, Mrs. Garcia knew the future was full of uncertainty and challenges. But she also knew that she was ready to face whatever came her way, with courage, determination, and love in her heart, to protect her beloved students.